Night flying can offer some of the most exciting and enjoyable flying that you will ever experience. At night, there is usually less traffic. The air is generally smoother, and the communication frequencies are less congested. However, because your vision is less sharp at night, you need to pay close attention to numerous items when planning and making a night flight. Safe night flying begins with careful and thorough flight planning. Because of the visual limitations of night flying, chart references and the altimeter may be your only reliable means of determining altitudes sufficient for terrain and obstacle clearance. You should also have available the adjacent chart if your route of flight will take you near the edge of the sectional. By referring to the adjacent chart, you'll be able to identify distant cities or landmarks not found on the primary chart. Your preparation for a night flight should also include a complete weather briefing, including a study of the available weather reports and forecasts. When reviewing this material, it is important that you pay close attention to the temperature dew point spread. A small spread is a good indication of the possibility of the formation of ground fog. Because aircraft drift is very difficult to detect during takeoffs and landings at night, it's a good idea to also pay close attention to the wind direction and speed. Another important consideration is that under no circumstances should a night VFR flight be made under poor or marginal weather conditions. As you continue with your planning, it's recommended that you check the availability of en route and destination airport lighting systems along your route of flight. This information can be found on aeronautical charts and in the airport facility directory. It's also important that you check the status of these lights by reviewing the pertinent notices to airmen. Once your planning is finished, you're ready to pre-flight the airplane. Remember that before any flight at night, you should allow at least 30 minutes for your eyes to adapt to the darkness. To ensure that you completely check the airplane prior to departure, use a reliable flashlight during your pre-flight inspection. You should also have a second, smaller flashlight in the cabin for reading or for use in the event of an in-flight electrical malfunction. As you conduct your pre-flight inspection, avoid shining the flashlight directly into your eyes. This could destroy your night vision, requiring you to readapt your eyes to the dark. Part of your night pre-flight inspection should include a check of all aircraft lighting. Besides assuring that the anti-collision lights are working, you must check your position lights, which are required by regulation for any operation between official sunset and sunrise. These lights help other pilots identify your direction of travel. When doing this, it's a good idea to tap the lens of the light to check for any loose connections. If the light blinks when tapped, the light should be fixed prior to departure. Although landing lights are not required unless the aircraft is operated for hire, most airplanes are equipped with one, and it should also be inspected. You should also check cabin lighting during your pre-flight to make sure the instrument panel is clearly visible. Once you have completed your visual inspection, it's wise to check the ramp area for hazards. Things such as tie-down ropes, chocks, and step ladders are more difficult to see at night, and a quick check of the surrounding ramp area could prevent a mishap during taxi. Before starting the aircraft, take some time to thoroughly familiarize yourself with the location of all instruments, controls, and switches. Fumbling for them in the dark can be confusing and dangerous. While cockpit organization is important at all times, it's especially important at night. Knowing where everything is located will make it easier to find your computer, sectional, or even a pencil. One way to keep from losing essential items in the dark is to use a clipboard or mat board to fasten charts, navigation logs, and other essentials in a known location. As an additional aid, be sure your sectional is open to the proper panel and your route of flight is clearly visible. During an engine start at night, use extra caution. In addition to the normal call-out of clear, turning on the position lights or momentarily flashing other aircraft lights will alert others in the area. Before taxiing, especially at an unfamiliar airport, you might want to request taxi instructions. Then, when ready to taxi, turn on the taxi or landing light. Because taxi lights do not cast very wide beams and illumination to either side of the aircraft is limited, taxi speeds should be slower at night. When approaching another aircraft, be courteous and turn the landing light off, if safety permits. This will avoid temporarily blinding the oncoming pilot. As you're taxiing, if there is ever any doubt about where you are or how to get somewhere, don't hesitate to ask. It's also important to remember that when you receive a runway holding or hold short instruction, you must read it back to the controller. Answering with your call sign or Roger is not acceptable. Before taking off, it's important that you conduct a thorough run-up. Since it's not as easy to detect an unintentional forward movement at night as it is during the day, it's a good idea to use the parking brake. By carefully completing all of the items on the checklist, you can detect potential problems which might arise. Before taxiing onto an active runway for takeoff, you should carefully check the final approach course for aircraft. At non-tower airports, it is recommended that you do a slow 360-degree turn in the same direction as the flow of air traffic while closely searching for other aircraft in the vicinity. After ensuring that the final approach and runway are clear of other traffic, you are ready to taxi onto the runway for takeoff. It's important to note that during night operations, ATC will not issue a clearance to taxi into position and hold for intersection departures. During a night takeoff, the runway center line and runway lights provide visual references for directional control. As you begin the takeoff roll, maintain directional control by selecting a reference point down the runway, such as the point where the runway lights appear to converge. Having fewer reference points at night can make it more difficult to establish the proper climb attitude, especially over sparsely populated areas. Therefore, you should use your flight instruments to help establish the proper attitude. As you gain altitude, more distant highways, cities, and lighted areas may become visible. On a clear, moonlit night, it may be possible to determine the outline of terrain and other surface features. Flying at higher altitudes at night will increase your visibility for pilotage, radio navigational reception, and gliding distance. However, you need to consider the existing weather and oxygen requirements at these altitudes. Scanning at night is another important consideration. Although an aircraft's position lights enhance the see and be seen concept, you must not become complacent when scanning for traffic. Unless a conscious effort is made to separate an aircraft's lights from stars or the lights of a city, conflicting traffic can go unnoticed. One way you can help other pilots to see your aircraft is by turning on your landing light. In fact, the FAA is encouraging all pilots to turn on their landing lights when operating within 10 miles of any airport, regardless of the time of day. Another thing that can be very difficult to detect at night is changing weather conditions and cloud formations. Typically, the first indication of flying into marginal weather conditions is a disappearance of stars or lights on the ground. A halo or luminous glow around the position lights or a reflection of the landing and anti-collision lights may indicate you have penetrated an area of haze or clouds. If you inadvertently enter these conditions, you should immediately use instrument references to establish control of the airplane in straight and level flight. Then note your present heading and make a 180-degree turn back to visual conditions. To help avoid accidentally flying into instrument weather, you should continually update your weather briefing by contacting en route Flight Advisory Service or any flight service station along your route.
Your concern for changing weather conditions should be combined with careful planning for emergencies. If you need to make a forced landing, finding a suitable field presents special problems. The nature of the surface and terrain is difficult to see, even on a bright moonlit night.
In the event of an engine failure at night, one of your primary considerations should be to plan an approach and landing to an unlighted area. Lighted areas typically indicate structures that may obstruct a landing area.
Although highways may provide places to land, you need to be aware of the possibility of power lines that are often located along and across them. As a safety precaution, many pilots alter their route at night to keep within a reasonable distance of lighted airports for most of the flight.
When planning for an emergency landing at night, one of the primary considerations should include selecting a landing area close to public access if possible.
When approaching an airport at night, it may be difficult to identify the runway layout until you are almost on top of the airport. For this reason, you should fly toward the airport beacon light until the lights outlining the runway are distinguishable. To fly a traffic pattern of the proper size and direction, the runway threshold and runway edge lights must be positively identified. Once seen, the approach threshold lights should be kept in sight throughout the airport traffic pattern and approach. To conclude your flight, the same landing procedures and techniques used during the day are also performed at night. However, runway lights, airport lights, city lights, and the airplane's landing light may create illusions not encountered during daylight. Thus, speed, altitude, and distances may be more difficult to judge. If glide slope information, such as a VASI or PAPI, is available, it will help you maintain the proper descent attitude. By carefully monitoring your flight instruments and power setting, you can help to ensure a smooth approach and landing. You should practice night landings both with and without the landing light to enable you to make a safe landing in case the light fails. Although special consideration is needed at night, proper preparation and flying techniques will help to make flying at night a very enjoyable experience. Your ability to go from daylight to the night environment will not only add to your airplane's usefulness, but it will also increase the pleasure you receive from flying.